Okay, so let's talk about solid waste, chapter 20 in your textbook. So the definition of solid waste, anything we don't want, stuff we throw away. There's two categories of solid waste, the industrial kind and the municipal kind. Industrial has that word industry in it, so anything that industry uses to make their goods and services counts as industrial waste. Municipal are like us, homes, the work, the school, places that aren't manufacturing stuff. Industrial waste, you can see on our pie chart, most of it comes from mining. This is a red flag. We should not be mining new materials out of the earth. We should be recycling, repurposing, and using what we have already dug out. So this is a really big problem because our earth is finite. We only have so much stuff and we're wasting it. A lot of our industrial waste comes from agriculture and some of it comes from industry. All of these use oil and gas, as you can see, and equipment because we got to transport whatever we're doing to somewhere. Mining uses different chemicals. Agriculture adds pesticides and fertilizers, and industry adds chemicals in the production process. Municipal waste, the big takeaway here is most of this waste could be recycled, but we're not. Paper should never be in a landfill. That's easy to recycle stuff. Glass, metals, most plastics should be recycled. Wood should get repurposed. Yard trimmings and food should go to compost and be put back into the ground to feed the soil and nurture it. So really we're putting too much stuff in our landfills. They're filling up too fast and we're running out of space to make our garbage go somewhere. All right, we talked about sorting waste properly. Metal, glass, and plastics could be rinsed out and stuck straight into recycle. Paper should be separated by itself. Most of our places don't do that. Household stuff should go in its own little trash can, and then food should go in its own thing. Most of us don't do that, and hence we've got a landfill problem. So where does it usually go? Well, if it's just blowing down the street, it's going to end up in a river and make its way to the ocean. Some places, usually not in the US, use an open landfill, which has its own problems. It could go into a sanitary landfill as well. I need to change that slide. We could burn it, and it's good to know that the USA is the hog of waste. We don't have the highest amount of population, but we do have the highest amount of solid waste. So remember, we are very wasteful, and we need to be more mindful of how much waste we're using, consuming, and throwing away. Just a reminder, certain things that are mostly man-made take longer to decompose than nature things. Paper-based, wood-based don't take that long. Plastics take really long time, and glass, because it is an element made out of silicone, it's never going to go away because it's silicone. It's an element and it doesn't decay into anything else. Most of the stuff that goes washes ashore could have been recycled, but now it's in our oceans washing around. So what do we do with it? We have three options. We can bury it, we can burn it, or we can ship it away into someone else's backyard. Not in my backyard. Just make it go away. So burying it means landfill. Burning it means incineration. And shipping it means pay another country to take our stuff and they can deal with it. Ideally, like integrated pest management, we want to use a combination of all of our technologies in the best possible way to not use these virgin materials, to not fill up the landfill with everything, just what absolutely has to be in there, to burn what can be burned for fuel, and then to deal with the hazardous waste stuff in the best possible way. Right now it's pretty much just dump it in the landfill and we'll figure it out later. Well, later's coming. Okay, so an open dump, one of the bury options, is we just pile it up. It's smelly. poor people in a lot of countries go to these dumps to try to to try to find something valuable, make some money. Usually a lesser developed country, I always want to say country does that. They don't have a lining. It can be hazardous to these people here. There's no like health plan for them. It's dangerous, and there's disease crawling around from vermin, mosquitoes, rats, whatever else is in there, and it does not smell good. So if it's open, the smell is permeating and it's unpleasant. Landfills can fail, especially if there's no liner. If the liner breaks, it can get into groundwater, it can get into soil, and that can spread through our nutrient cycling. Tires are their own thing. They are really hard to get rid of. If you burn them, they burn forever. They smolder and re-catch fire, and look at all this pollutant here. It is toxic. It's not good. So sometimes they just accumulate in a pile. Water gathers in them, so mosquitoes breed in standing water. It's little houses for all kinds of little critters, and it's ugly, and it can be dangerous. So a proper landfill, well, they actually cover it so the smell is contained and birds can't get to it and fly around it, and it cuts down on the critters entering this landfill. What they do is they have a liner that helps to prevent leaks. They use clay because it is impervious to water. Water does not go through the clay. And they have a bunch of monitoring wells about the methane that is something that decomposes from garbage over time. And then they can capture the methane, and they can create their own electricity from burning the methane, and they can be kind of off-grid and self-sufficient. So sanitary landfills have a lot of pros. They have a few cons. This methane one could end up kind of being over here because it produces the energy, so it's a pro/con. So the big concern really is the smell, noise, I should have put smell, traffic dust, and the potential for leaks. But if we do a good job monitoring, that's pretty low. One interesting thing after landfills happen is you can cover them up and make a nice green space. And then these little monitoring wells can monitor the methane and capture it for energy. The next thing we can do is incinerate the waste, and we can turn the waste to a smaller amount. So ash, something burned up into ashes, takes up much less space than the thing that we went and threw in the trash can. And that process of burning has the added benefit that we could turn that into a heat source that boils water to steam to turbine and makes electricity. So we can turn waste into electricity. And to ensure there's no air pollution, remember our good old friend, the wet scrubber and the electrostatic precipitator to filter out any potential air pollutants that might try to get out. And then we can take this ash over and put it in the landfill. Stuff landing in the ocean is a problem. Some countries, to deal with their tire problem, as mentioned earlier, this is their answer, and this becomes an artificial reef over time. Still have yet to know any long-lasting consequences because of the tire and the chemicals in the tire. These gyres happen in the garbage patch, work with the ocean currents, and these big gyres of plastic are just circling around in 5 different places of the ocean. And we know that this is not a healthy environment, and this guy's going to drown because the plastic line keeps him underwater and he breathes air. So there's a whole article up here. Please read it and be familiar with it from the EPA. The other thing we can do is ship it away. So we don't want it in our backyard. Not in my backyard. That's what NIMBY is. Out of sight, out of mind, but not really. So remember, there is no away when you throw it away. It has to go somewhere. So the greenies are the big generators of electronic waste. And then the other guys are potential destinations to handle, process, or take the waste for a price. All right. We should reduce, reuse, and recycle, but before we do all that, we should refuse it. We should choose not to have it happen in the first place. Why do we want all of this waste to happen for stuff we're trying to buy? So we should ask ourselves some questions, and we should look at how stuff is manufactured. Does the company change their process? If they're making something, could they do it in a less harmful way or a no harmful product way? Do they have to use poisonous chemicals to make stuff for us, or could they find another method that's not hazardous, poisonous, etc.? Do they have to bubble wrap it and put it in plastic and shrink wrap it and put it in a box and another box and another box and smash it with a hammer? No, they could reduce their packaging, and they could plan to make things last longer. We have that thing called planned and perceived obsolescence. Obsolescence. I spelled it wrong. You know what I meant. Um, we could make it like we used to back in the day and plan for things to last a really long time and not engineer it to break so that you want to buy a new one. After we do that, then we could reuse it, we could repair it, and we could recycle or compost it. And as a last resort, do the waste treatment plan. So we need to change our thoughts of how we think about throwing things away, when we think about throwing things away. So we throw away a lot of food. The amount of food we throw away is staggering. There's a few Netflix documentaries about it, about people who actually get their food out of dumpsters and scrape it by. I'm not saying do that, but you could change your portions. Do you have to buy so much food? Do you have to make such big portions if you always have leftovers and they end up spoiling? Scale down. One thing you could do if you have leftovers is fertilizer, compost, garden for your lawn. So the green things can go in, the brown things can go in, add a little water, and over time you've got really nice soil amendment to go into fix your lawn, your plants, etc. Downside, they can get kind of smelly and they can attract friends. Probably the ones you don't want. So a lot of times, I think I told you all this before, but students will get all excited and try to compost, and then a few weeks later their parents shut it down because it's too smelly. Or too many friends came. Get a cat. All right. So the idea is, let's take this waste and we can turn it into energy. So we can do landfill gas, we can do biogas composting, and we can do thermal conversion to turn it into heat and power, or even turning things into charcoal or gas or oil. So when you're a consumer, do you really have to buy this? Do you need it? Could you get it one that's already been used, or borrow one? Do you have to have a brand new one? Really? Do you have to? When you're done with it, can someone else use it? Could it be reused by somebody else instead of just throwing it away? Do you have to use a throwaway version of what there's a permanent version of? Do you have to use a plastic fork? You have a metal fork. You could get a bamboo straw, a metal straw, a real plate, not a paper plate. So think ahead, a cloth napkin instead of a paper napkin. Something we have done good this year, we've been using emails instead of paper, so all of our assignments have been paperless this year. I may even keep that for the future. And try about thinking about buying stuff in bulk. Maybe it'll help. Sometimes it's more packaging, so be careful what you buy and how you buy it. Okay, so another big deal is there's solid waste, but then there's hazardous waste, which the definition is anything that is threatening to human health or the environment is considered hazardous. And if we throw it away or don't want it anymore, then it's hazardous waste. A lot of times it comes in these barrels, these 55-gallon drums, and they have these labels on them. By law, if you know it's a hazardous substance in here, you have to slap that sticker on. That was my old job before I was a teacher. So there's kind of 4 major categories. There's poisons, there's water reactives, there's corrosives, and there's flammables. Those all sound pretty hazardous. So these will kill you. These can react with water, cause weird fires. These can burn through things and go through containers like plastics and burn your skin and hurt you, and these can catch on fire as well. All not good things. A lot of the stuff we have in our home are that. So we have a lot of flammable things. We have a lot of poison things. We have a lot of corrosive things. We don't have a lot of reactive things, but we have a few. So all the stuff we use for cleaning has low amounts of hazards. Paints and woodworking things, stains and varnishes, batteries, glues, the pesticides, the flea powders, all the car stuff, that's all got hazards in it. And they all can be not good for you, so don't open them up. Don't deal with them. And you should not put them in your trash can. A lot of people do, but they should go to a hazardous waste it's a household hazardous waste collection site, and there is one in Anaheim. So you can just look it up, see when it's open, and they'll take all your stuff. All right, coltan. So coltan is an ingredient. It goes in our cell phones. It's columbite tantalite, and it helps our phones act as capacitors and conduct the electricity and power our phones and make things work the way we like them to. The problem is coltan is in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and they've got about 80% of the coltan in the world, and we're seeing a big decline because it's where these guys live, the gorillas. And so we're destroying their habitat to get the stuff so our phones will work. Why aren't we recycling our phones? Why aren't we recycling our e-waste? We need to recycle our e-waste. It's a big, big deal. Stop buying new stuff, or only buy it if it says made with certifiable recycled parts, refurbished parts. E-waste is not getting recycled enough. It has toxic stuff in it, and it's dangerous to the people that are mining it and extracting it. And you have a video to watch this week about that, and how it's mostly kids being exploited to get this coltan out so we can have our phones work. So when we dispose of our waste and it's hazardous, it can't just go to a landfill, it can't just go on a boat somewhere, and it can't just be burned up easily. So we have to take it to a certain place first, a treatment storage disposal facility, TSDF. The T is for treating it, and we try to make it a non-hazardous waste, or at least a less hazardous waste. So we do some chemistry here, and we take the product and we try to alter it and change it into something that's less or not hazardous anymore. And once it's not hazardous, then it can do the other route. It can go to the landfill. It can be incinerated. It can be shipped out somewhere. If it stays hazardous, if it stays in this less hazardous but still hazardous category, we have some options. We can store it in barrels in the ground, kind of like nuclear waste in the unit of energy we talked about. If it's a liquid hazardous waste, we can inject it in a well, a deep injection well below the groundwater line, like way down here, and hopefully it won't come up. We monitor to make sure it doesn't. We can incinerate it in a special incineration that's a little different than regular solid waste. And we can also bury it, I think. Storage buried, it's kind of the same thing. I repeated myself. So a little terminology for you is a brown field, and that is an area where nothing can grow because hazardous waste has ruined the area. It's dangerous, it's still in there, it's still a pollutant, it's still contaminated, and it's still unhealthy to be around it. And this is just central to Northern California. There's a lot. If we look worldwide, you'd be overwhelmed how many brown fields there are. All right, so some ways to make things not hazardous anymore. Hazmat detox. Some physical methods. This looks a lot like integrated pest management. We can use charcoal. Charcoal's a great purifier. It absorbs and cleans and purifies things. And here's kind of a little graphic how it works. The activated carbon kind of absorbs it, and the small organic molecules cling to carbon. Because if you remember, carbon wants some more electrons, so it's ready to bond with stuff in order to do so. So it'll bond to those pollutants and trap them. The other new kind of thing is this magnetism thing. So like say an oil spill happens, you magnetize the oil, and then you use magnets to separate the oil from the water, and then you take it to another facility and you demagnetize it, and you have clean water left, sorry, when you take that oil out, but then you demagnetize it and you get clean oil, recycled oil, and the magnetizing material comes back to go do it all over again. This is pretty new tech. It's very cool. So another thing of like hazardous waste, I just said you can chemically convert it to something less harmful. And then the other way is biologically. There's two kind of cool biological things we can do. There's bacteria in existence that eat hazardous materials and they digest it. There's an oil-eating bacteria, there's a nickel-eating bacteria, there's a lead-eating bacteria. There's like some cool stuff that happens that way. And then there's some plants that can absorb chemicals and store it in their roots, and so the chemical is not in the water system or the soil system, it's in the plant. Thanks, plants. Okay, this is a lot. So bioremediation, officially, is the use of biological organisms to clean up, and the special word here is remediate, environmental contaminants. So we use these microorganisms, bacteria mostly, living in the environment, and their ability to metabolize a whole bunch of different, an array of chemical compounds. When that microorganism is there, it can break down or neutralize a pollutant. And then the microorganism thrives and the pollutant levels fall over time. So a graph would be microorganism goes up and pollutant goes down. So that would be nice. Pollutant organism. Eventually, the ecosystem can return to its original condition or pretty dang close. And then the organism, when it's around the thing it's supposed to be absorbing, its additional nutrients, so it speeds up and it kind of catalyzes the process, and so it is biostimulated and it'll get rid of the pollutants even faster. Okay, so the plant side of things, phytoremediation. Phyto is literally plant, not light. Don't think photo, that's light. Phyto, plant, photo, light. So don't get backwards on that. This is in your book, but there's some big words. Rhizofiltration. Rhizo means root. So the roots absorb bad stuff. Sunflowers absorb radioactive stuff. Thanks, sunflowers. Stabilization. Phytostabilization. So trees like willow and poplar trees will absorb chemicals and keep them out of the groundwater. Phytodegradation. The poplar tree absorbs toxic organics and it actually does the chemistry for us and turns it into less harmful compounds. And then phytoextraction is plants like the mustard tree and fern absorb heavy metals and store them in their leaf. And you can actually harvest a leaf and get the heavy metals back out through the plant. And like, I need some lead. Thanks, leaf. Give me the lead. It's crazy. So this is in your book. I highly recommend you read it and know the basics of it. I have seen these words in there before. So just know rhizo, phytostabilization, phytodegradation, phytoextraction. Just know the basic process of what happens with each of those. This is actually a really good breakdown for your that's in your book. Okay, another new tech. This is like new since I've been teaching APES. Is this plasma arc? Plasma arc? What? It's like sci-fi around here. So this plasma arc, it gasifies everything, it turns everything into plasma. So you send an electric current through some inert gas, it creates a plasma. Remember, solid, liquid, gas, plasma. The plasma decomposes the hazardous waste and they encapsulate it, and then it'll convert it into some kind of synthetic gas or inorganic material, which we can use for something if we want to. It's kind of crazy. Right now, always with new tech, super expensive, but could be the new thing once we get the price down. So here's all the trash. Here comes the plasma torch. The slag comes out. The synthetic gas comes out this way. That would be this stuff. And you're good to go. Okay. Since everything's so hazardous, there's a lot of laws and regulations involved with this unit. So here's some laws. These are laws. Regulation means law. These are United States laws, and then the conventions are international. So RCRA, it's called RCRA. It stands for the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act. So think about it. If you use a resource, you need to use it wisely and conserve it, and you need to be responsible for its recovery. The nickname this law gets is Cradle to Grave, and it has to do with hazardous waste. So once you create a hazardous waste, you have to prove that you properly destroyed it, and it is no longer a threat to the environment, to society, to people. So if you bought something hazardous like, I don't know, trichloroethane, you have the date you bought it, and then you have to prove that you took it to a TSDF, remember that, a treatment, storage, and disposal facility, and they will issue you a certificate of destruction that shows you are no longer responsible for that waste product because it is correctly and legally handled and destroyed and regulated. CERCLA, Comprehensive Environmental Response Compensation and Liability Act. So this came after RCRA, and this is known as the Superfund Law. So these are sites where hazardous waste is contaminated the ground, the environment, and people are responsible. Whoever did it have to clean it up. They can have fines and they can go to jail. This is where the brownfields come from. So a brownfield is part of this Superfund site. So if a site goes Superfund, whoever contributed to that environmental problem on that area is financially and legally responsible to clean it up. And if they can't, they go to jail. All right, so because of that, we got the SARA law, the Superfund Amendment and Reauthorization Act. Again, it helps pay for these Superfund sites and the health effects that people occur. So when suing happens, this is government money set aside to help pay because usually the company claims bankruptcy and then the people are kind of out of luck trying to fix the whole problem. So there are some federal funds set aside to help in cases like that. Overseas. So this is a convention, which means it's a treaty or an agreement. Treaties are not law. You do not have to follow them. It's just the world saying, hey, we think this should happen. So the Basel Convention is a promise to not ship hazardous wastes overseas. Don't make lesser developed countries take our hazardous waste. Not all countries do this, and the US has kind of, depending on our administration, flip-flopped on this year after year. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. We're not breaking a law. It's just an agreement saying, yeah, we won't do it. And you can be part of that agreement or not part of that agreement. There's no penalty either way. The other one we have talked about, I think before, is the Stockholm Convention, and that one has to do with those persistent organic pollutants, and countries all agreed to ban their use. And again, a lot of LDCs have agreed to not do that because they need to use DDT to control their mosquitoes in tropical areas, for example. So again, it's an agreement, it's not a law. Okay, my next favoriteest thing in the whole world, biomimicry. Please watch this video on biomimicry. I love it. But this is the idea that we take something in nature and take the design and make it work for us. So some famous ones, our stealth bomber is actually modeled after the peregrine falcon, the fastest flying bird. And they took the aerodynamics of this bird and modeled a stealth bomber after it. Velcro. Why do those little burrs stick into your socks? Well, if you look up really close, those burrs have little hooks. And those little hooks are what stick into your sock fabric. And that's exactly what Velcro does. This is the sock part, and this is the burr part. Burr, sock. And there's millions of designs like this, and they just take these cool ideas of nature, and you look at nature to help solve the problem. It's an amazing field. It's a great major, and it's really kind of cool for engineering and science coming together if you like both. Okay, so our last little topic is environmental justice. This is a rough topic, and it gets kind of complicated, but these are the major points of it so far. It's kind of just coming into its own. So the countries focused on reducing how much pollution is emitted in the air when we became more eco-friendly. And because we became focused on reducing the pollution, we've had a lot of environmental laws that have been great, and we've had really good outcomes. So the good example is here in Los Angeles. When I was a kid, we had smog days and we couldn't even go outside and play because our chests hurt and burned and it was horrible. And so we did the catalytic converter and it reduced NOx and SOx, and now we don't have these smog days anymore. So a good thing has happened. Then in the 90s, we started looking around like who lives around these cities that are still polluted, that are still around? Who's breathing the dirty air? Who lives near the most toxic waste facilities? Who lives near all these companies that are putting out all the pollution? And the answer is people in poverty, mostly people in poverty, because the rich people had the money to NIMBY the waste. To NIMBY the waste requires money, and if you don't have money, you get the waste. So this started the environmental justice movement. So there's groups that work to make sure everyone gets treated fairly environmentally. So of course, all the low income level families tend to be the ones near all of these problem areas with the bad air, the bad water, the bad soil. So some reasons that this is true is because companies are building it where it's cheaper or less political resistance. Some people are afraid to fight because maybe they're not legal citizens, maybe they don't have the money, maybe they're not educated on these issues, and they don't know. They're like, oh, a new company's coming, great, I'm going to get a job. But it pollutes the heck out of the area and it's bad for the environment and your children and your family. Maybe that's not good. It's a really hard battle. It's not certain always that the government will help. Again, it kind of depends what's in office, who's in office. There's a long way for everyone to go to have clean air and clean water, and this should be a right to everybody. Clean air and clean water should not cost money. They should just be a thing that we have. So we're just getting into this environmental justice idea. There's whack jobs on both ends of it. There's some really crazy environmental justice warriors out there that are like way out of line, and of course there's the other side, is like deniers that it is even a problem. So hopefully we can meet and agree on a good compromise. So our school likes to show this, so just to remind you, equality is an assumption that everyone benefits from the same supports, and they think of it as equal treatment. But is it? Is it really equal? Equity, everyone gets what they need so we can get the result that we're looking for, and that might look different for other people. And then justice, the inequity was addressed and the barrier was removed. So now it doesn't matter. Everybody can see everything. So these are just some ideas to keep in mind when we think about stuff and when we think about our country and our world and what's fair and what's not fair. Okay, hope that helps. Study and we should be good.